Celtics Stuff Live.
Welcome to Celtics Stuff Live on the CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider of audio and video coverage for the Boston Celtics. Justin Poulin here along with John Duke, and we're going to be talking post All-Star break. Pick me up with the Celtics. That's right, 2 in a row on a second night of a back-to-back. Of course, it was against the New York Knicks, and they were without Kristaps Porzingis. Maybe a little bit closer than you'd like, but still, to win 2 in a row coming out of the All-Star break. Marcus Smart, after a 4-week break, seems to have his legs back anyway. Enough that he throws down 2 dunks in the game. Definitely a surprise to me. I think it was a surprise to everybody in the Celtics universe. We'll get to Marcus Smart and more in this episode of Celtics Stuff Live. John and I did take a break with the All-Stars ourselves. And I'll be honest with you, John, as we wrap up the maybe we just tidy up our absence and talk a little bit about the All-Star break. I've said this year after year. I'm just not a big fan, and I'll be 100% honest with you. I didn't watch a lick of it.
Yeah, and of course, as we talk about every year, I do. I watch all of it. I love it. Because
we've been down this road several times together.
It's not about the game.
This is like shampoo in your hair. This is wash, rinse, and repeat every season.
Right.
I watch more March Madness than I do All-Star break.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's fine. You know, I think that each is own. It's not real basketball, you know, but it's you know, kind of empty calories. It's cotton candy, you know. It's for some people, cotton candy's too sweet. For some people, it's perfect, you know. And not that I'm a cotton candy fan, but I'm an All-Star Game fan, you know. So the whole, you know, pomp and circumstance of it all, I'm good with it. I like it. I like the little contests. I kind of get annoyed with, you know, some things, but I don't, you know, try to hold them too true and be like, well, this dunk contest was better than that dunk contest.
Don't you feel like Twitter brings you up enough to speed? I mean, don't you feel like you can get it all in 30 minutes the next morning after each evening of All-Star break and just look on Twitter? I mean, like, listen, I saw all the Jaylen Brown highlights. I saw all the dunks. I saw all the lack of defense. I saw between the legs and slam. I really don't feel like I missed anything just hooking up to Twitter for 30 minutes the next morning, sipping on a cup of coffee and moving along with my day.
Maybe there's nostalgia in it for me as being a kid and watching it and, you know, Bird's, you know, 3-point contest wins and, you know, Dominique and Jordan at Chicago Stadium in '88. I mean, maybe that's part of it, what it is for me, but, you know, I like watching it with my kids. My kids like it. So it's kind of a really easily accessible situation for kids to watch, and all the stars are there. And so, you know, it's fun. It's nothing more than that. And, you know, this year the game became somewhat entertaining again, which is kind of nice. And there was defense and they were trying. And so I thought it was, all in all, I thought it was a successful weekend for the NBA. It was good for the NBA brand, if you care about such things. But I think overall it was something that was a positive for the NBA, and overall that's a good thing, I think.
Do you think most basketball fans watch the All-Star break? And I don't just mean guys like you and I that
like
have been covering it. No, because back in the day I watched it. When we first started this show, I watched the All-Star break. It just seemed like the same thing every year for me at a certain point. And really the slam dunk contest was what hooked me as a kid. And that really lost its luster for me several years ago. But I just mean in general, do the people following Celtics Stuff Live on Twitter or hanging out with the CLNS media, I want to say, organization, you know, the big Twitterverse that largely controls the Celtics Twitterverse in so many ways, right? I mean, there's a lot of Celtics content on the network. Do the people who follow all of us, that follow the Celtics, that hang out, do you think they're all heavy All-Star game watchers or All-Star festivity watchers?
I think any basketball they're into. You know, Celtics Twitter, weird Celtics Twitter was really well described by you know, on the Rain Jays podcast with Mick Coley last week. They did a great job talking about weird Celtics Twitter. those folks will watch anything, and some of it may be incomprehensible to many of us, but I think they are. I think they'll consume it in some way, and it's better than watching some other things that are out there. And quite frankly, what are your options right now? You're going to watch, pairs ice dancing. Are you going to watch,
I'd probably
what,
curling, right? I mean,
Yeah.
all right, so I'm with you. I'm not a big
Yeah,
Olympics
this is it.
fan on either end of it either. Like
Right.
so maybe that's just me. Poo poo, but I'm just
Teach his own. Teach his own.
I mean,
get it,
I like
though.
a little bit of the tricks, I like a little bit of the half pipe. I
Yeah.
can tune into the half pipe, snowboarding and whatever. And like I said, it's not that I'm 100% disinterested in the outcome. It's just the hours you have to put in, and a lot of it's just talking head. You know what I mean? That's kind of my thing.
Yeah, I see a lot of it, and it's a lot of just silliness. It's basically, over a weekend, it's about 8 hours of Shaqtin' a Fool. That's basically, and that's okay.
It really is.
If you can watch inside the NBA, or it's, less interesting cousin, players only on NBA TV, then, it's all right. But no, it's what it is. It serves its purpose. It's a good entry for people who are casual fans, or, kind of your point, I think, which is, diehard fans really consuming this as much as casual fans. Probably not to that degree, but if it's going on in the NBA universe, you almost have to know what's going on with the league. And, you look at last year where, you saw Boogie Cousins got traded over the course of the All-Star game. These things happen, and it's just, you have to be a part of it in some way. And being on Twitter is nice. And like you said, you can consume it in your own bites, but doing it in real time, there's something to be said for that. And the NBA is one of the few places where not only is it happening on the screen, but it's also happening on your laptop or your phone or iPad or whatever.
John gives it 2 thumbs up. All right, you can follow Celtics Stuff Live on Twitter at CSL_tweet live. You can follow me at CSL_Justin. John is at CSL_Duke. The entire CLNS Media Network is at CLNS Media. The Facebook page, facebook.com/CLNS fans. Don't forget to download the CLNS Media app for iOS and Android. Simply search CLNS Media in your app marketplace. And finally, the YouTube channel, youtube.com/CLNS Media for high definition, full length locker room interviews, the Garden Report, the Round Table. I really love the CLNS Media studios with the backdrop of Boston right behind the large glass windows. That's looking pretty sweet, John.
Yeah, I'm waiting to put the addition on here where you all can see. Well, not the city of Boston. Nothing. Actually, never mind. Scrap.
We can do anything with my background. It's just green screen. You can put anything in behind me. If they use this for the video clip on YouTube tomorrow, they'll probably put something wacky in there. But anyway, speaking of wacky, the Marcus Smart experience has been about as wacky as it can possibly get. So, I mean, the last 2 episodes heading into the All-Star break, I finally turned on our boy. You and I, staunch Marcus Smart apologists. We were constantly defending him, and he leaves. The defense goes to absolute pot, and then at the same time, he comes back, and the defense is back up, but also seriously his ups. Those 2 dunks that we kind of led into the show with, those 2 dunks were a surprise. One, obviously the lane was completely wide open. Wasn't a lot of defense being played to guard against it. But he takes 5 shots. He makes 4 of them. That's also very un-Marcus Smart-like. 2 dunks, very un-Marcus Smart-like. And then the very common theme for Marcus that we do always see is his defense. So it's good to have him back. I guess I gotta say I'm glad that they didn't trade him now that they went into that skid without him, and we see how much he's needed for the postseason. Still isn't going to do a lot to cure the lack of scoring on the second unit, though, even because really what we want to see is efficient Marcus Smart.
Yeah, and I would also say turning on them is I think you're being a bit harsh on yourself and on us, because we weren't turning on him. It's not like we thought he was worthless and joining the.
I advocated trading him with a first round pick.
But that's different. Well, okay, yeah, that was ridiculous. But I think, well, right, with the first round pick. See, that's the difference is things got twisted a little bit. And it became, well, Marcus Smart for a first round pick. That's not really what was being discussed. It was Marcus Smart to get back a first round pick and a rotation player and knowing Danny Ainge more and more on top of that. So that was really what the deal was.
I was definitely taking a first round pick, putting it with Marcus Smart and sending him off.
All right.
I was very down on the hissy fit in the hotel room. I'm not trying to take you down with me. It's not like,
I'm not going with you.
Exactly. It's not like I'm saying, I'm falling off the cliff and I'm like, John, lend me a hand. Then I just yank you down with me. I'll let us have a clear divide here. I soured on him. That's just what happened.
You did.
To the point of not being objective. I definitely wasn't being objective. I got my, I got it handed to me a little bit on Twitter from some of our loyal listeners who, in retrospect, were 100% correct. No way would we need to be throwing in a first-round pick with Marcus Smart for Tyreek Evans. If they were going to do that deal, it's sort of a change of scenery for both. They, wore out their welcome, didn't like their chances to re-sign, and wanted to shuffle the deck for the offseason potentially and just having first rights to try to lock somebody up. So, but I was throwing in a first-round pick. I wanted scoring for that second unit. I still think we need it.
Yeah.
But most of my motivation was because and maybe I felt betrayed. Maybe I felt like I defended this guy. And you know what? This conversation right now, if he had put a piece of glass through some ligaments, would be a very different conversation. Let's also, probably centimeters away from us both still being sour and continuing to sour because he wasn't traded and he can't play.
Well, and maybe that's where the divide is because to me, like the injury, I was looking at it from the perspective of, okay, maybe you can't re-sign him. Maybe he's not, or you could re-sign him, but in a normal world, you could re-sign a player like him, but his agent just isn't playing ball, and I think maybe that was kind of the angle I was looking at is like, well, if you can't re-sign him and he's still looking for $17 million, he's not coming back here no matter what you do. So you kind of cut your losses now. Hopefully he's seeing what Lou Williams is signing for, what others are probably going to get this summer and realizing I'm going to be on the other side of 10 million, not on the other side as I expected. So look, you're right, though. I mean, that if he got lucky really out of it, but the nice thing out of it, he got a break, and we saw the bounce that he can provide in his legs. It does probably causing a question, I think, perhaps for me. Does Smart's minutes need to be limited more so? Does he work so hard when he's out there that maybe he's playing too many minutes? Because that kind of extra bounce and that ability to drive and get to the bucket, boy, that makes his game kind of look completely different, especially against the Knicks, but even against Detroit as well. If he's got that bounce in him, he becomes a different player offensively. I'm just wondering, maybe what Brad needs to do is kind of ratchet those minutes back. As a 23, 24-year-old, I hate to say that, but maybe that's what they need to do so that way he's able to be who he can be.
He is a 100%, he's a 110%er on the floor every minute he's out there. It's part of the value. There's a lot to what you're saying there. Players in the league have talked about or insinuated for many, many years now that they learn to let the game come to them. They find a pace. They're trying to manage an 82-game season. It's part of the reason they wanted to reduce the back-to-backs and stretch the season out a little bit is all of this. And I think that that's probably a very valid point. He doesn't know how to turn it on and turn it off at the right points in the game. He's just 100% on like 5 cups of Java every time he gets on the floor, right? Or more. And sometimes even in the hotel room, he's still on, right? So maybe I think there's a very valid point that you're making there. And it also probably is the reason he can't be the number one guard on any team, because he'll wear himself out by the time he gets to the fourth quarter. One of the reasons I think it works that he doesn't start, but then he finishes the game is precisely what you just said. And we've seen him always be an excellent closer because he's always got that extra motor, but maybe it does wear him down also over the course of the season, and that has to be a concern. And no better opportunity for us to have noticed that than for this kid to get 3 to 4. What was it? It was almost 4 weeks, wasn't it? Truthfully, almost 4 weeks.
Yeah, almost. Yeah,
so
just
almost
about.
a month break in the middle of the year, none of which had an impact on his conditioning other than he wasn't getting regular run. And then he comes out and he's clearly, just a lot more athletic than we had noticed maybe in the middle doldrums of the year. So I think there's a lot to be said. Now, we still have the issue with the second unit scoring though. So this is still an issue for the team, and Sean Grandy was on a surprise episode of the new Celtics Beat with Adam Kaufman, and formerly of Celtics at 7. Everybody will remember that from Saturday mornings. And Sean says he doesn't think Hayward's coming back. And, as we noted at the beginning of the season, I really felt like the bench scoring would be not an issue, mitigated by the fact that you were going to have somebody like Gordon who could come back out onto the floor, stagger the minutes between him, Kyrie, and Horford, and be okay. But Sean doesn't think he's coming back. So you and I have been, as much as we have always unwaveringly supported Marcus Smart, after about 4 weeks post-injury, you and I have been unwavering in our expectation that he would come back and at least provide some minutes.
I would say that right now, yes, the trend lines seem to be very much skeptical of that pursuit. I think a month ago, maybe I might have, I think I was feeling pretty good about that prediction. Of course, there's the whole 323 comment on Instagram that Kyrie put on Gordon's Insta account where he said, 323, and the idea being like, okay, that's the date you're coming back. And the other piece of this is that, what Brad Stevens talked about is that, somehow Gordon needs to go from, he's on this Alter G machine, which basically kind of, it reduces the gravitational forces on your body. So that way, though you're running, you're not using your full body weight. So, it can
something
reduce
like 40% of his body weight was being put on or something like that. And he'll travel with the team once he can actually jump and run without,
right.
Without any assistance, essentially.
Right. So, and they said he's at 60 right now, so he's got to get to 100.
He's at 60. It was 40% of the load was reduced. That's what it is. Okay.
Yeah. So, okay. So we sit here about a month. We're recording this on the 25th of February, and there's a month to get from that point. Now, the question is, what's the next step once he's running, jumping at full height? At what point beyond that do you need to be game ready? And I think that's the question to me is like, okay, how do you go from 60 to 100? And then how many posts are there between 100 and, okay, go play NBA basketball? I don't know the answer. And I think if he was at 100 now,
it's 100% limited minutes a month from now, growing into April. And I think by the time the postseason rolls around, they're still limiting his minutes maybe to 20 to 25, but he can play.
Yeah. I think so too. I think, Paul George comes back from actually a worse injury than this. Than what Gordon Hayward went through. And he played 9 games that season. Yes, admittedly, it was earlier in the off season. But I know, I think they're just trying to pull those expectations back. I think that's the message they're sending out. I just don't believe
Sean's close to that messaging too, so.
Of course he is.
I think,
we love you, Sean.
Yep. And absolutely. But at the same time, you gotta sing, I think you gotta sing the company line, or so to speak, toe the company line.
Yeah. I don't know.
But it's for Hayward's and the fans' benefit. This team is still really solid. Half game out of first behind Toronto, right? Toronto lost a game, at least one. I didn't look at their record, but I know they've lost at least one game since the All-Star break, while the Celtics have won 2. So the Celtics are one game ahead and 2 games behind Toronto, and you still have to like their chances. They're healthy. We see the performance of somebody like Jaylen Brown, who just continues to grow throughout this season. We'll talk about him in just a second. But not only does he continue to grow, but Jayson Tatum seems to find his stroke, at least in the first couple of games back from the All-Star break, after being a little rusty there for a good long stretch. Would be nice to see him come back. But before we get into that, listen up, Hoops fans. Basketball season, well, the All-Star break is behind us. Your favorite hardwood heroes are battling for playoff position. It's time for you to put your fantasy knowledge to the test to win huge cash prizes every night playing one-day fantasy basketball at DraftKings.com. At DraftKings, there are so many ways to play. Choose from public contests with huge cash prizes or private contests where you can compete against your friends. They've even got beginner and casual contests where you'll play against people of a similar skill level. The best part, you get to draft a new team each day, and drafting a team is arguably the best part of fantasy. The only thing that's better is winning cash doing it. Just ask Dan from St. Louis or Jeremy from Austin. They both turned a $3 entry into $1,000. Huge cash prizes and bragging rights await only at DraftKings. Use the code CLNS at DraftKings.com free with your first deposit for your share of $10,000 in total prizes tonight. So don't wait. Use code CLNS at DraftKings.com now. Choose your lineup and you can cash in tonight. Again, that's code CLNS only at DraftKings.com. The game inside the game. Minimum $5 deposit required. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details. So, John, we really haven't pumped up. Boy, I just cracked like a high school kid. We really haven't pumped up Jaylen Brown the proper way this season. I mean, if you really think about the hype machine that I've been on, it's been quiet for a long time, John. Come on, John. We've talked more about Jayson Tatum and Marcus Smart this season. We obviously throw Kyrie Love because, I mean, look at what he did to Frankie. Poor Frankie. Frankie on his ass. I mean, that crossover along the baseline just put him on the floor. Crazy. So we give Kyrie his love. But Jaylen really hasn't gotten his full Justin Poole in them. Called it at number 3, wanted to draft him due this season. I mean, if you really are looking back over multiple episodes, I've been uncharacteristically quiet on this kid, and I'm not going to use the All-Star break to pump him up. I'm just going to say I love the sound when that three-point ball hits the net with no rim. It just drops in, and then when he does the flush, and that baseline move with literally no room to get around the defender and cut along the line, not to mention the oops from Kyrie, has just been awesome to watch the last couple of games.
I would say, I'm going to join you on the pumping the air into the balloon of Jaylen Brown. He's had a really great run. I thought even before the break, not so much the last 2 games, but the week before that, he has added some playmaking to what he does. I think he took a little bit of that on, when Smart's absence is kind of being a secondary or third, maybe, tertiary, perhaps playmaker, but he's joining that ranks. He's not at that level. I mean, I'm not saying he's a Smart level or a Kyrie level or, God forbid, even a Horford level guy in terms of creating plays for teammates, but things are starting to click for him. The one thing I would say for him has been consistency. That's where I'm kind of on the Jaylen Brown thing.
So level with incremental steps being built. I mean, remember, there was still a lot of out of control drives to the basket where he didn't know what he was going to do with the ball when he got there at the beginning of the year. But I'd say over the last 45 to 60 days, that has virtually vanished.
Yeah, I think, I agree. I think the out of control, I would say the week before All-Star game, we saw some of that, but maybe that was just a feature of everyone being tired and nobody running the way it needed to. I think in terms of production is what I'm looking for. It's like, when can they get to the point where they can count on those 15 to 20 points a game from Jaylen Brown? That's the point where I'm looking for that. And if he can fill that role, then backslide that we've seen from Tatum, which is, a different issue entirely, but you're less concerned about Tatum's inability to kind of keep shooting at the same pace he was early on. If we can get to a point where Brown is just solid there as that third scorer, sometimes the second scorer, I think that really helps, kind of level things out a bit for this team.
Is he the guy we need to do the bench?
No, I was just going to say, I do not think that's the role. I think he needs to stay where he is right now. Keep him. I don't think he's the type of scorer, unlike Tatum, that goes and gets his buckets. But I think as the guy playing with right now, playing with Irving, playing with Horford, I think that's the best place for him to kind of make his mark. I think Tatum is a different animal, and I think that's why we were looking at that early on. But unfortunately, I think we're going to have to look at that scoring come from Greg Monroe, coming from Marcus Smart, creating opportunities for other guys. And, I think probably just mixing and matching some of these guys. I think it's going to be a tough run.
That's so harsh.
Well,
I mean, Monroe can't even play defense, so then you're net negative. You're net zero. Yeah, you're not running out of scoring, but you're also not able to make the stops. So it's a tough battle there trying to get that groove for that second unit. I agree. I would have hoped that Tatum would have grown into that, and instead I think he hit the rookie wall. It does seem like he may be coming out of it, but I would absolutely love to see Jaylen Brown be able to take on that second unit role, but it may be another year yet.
Yeah, I think this is a big summer for Jaylen. I think he made some great strides this summer. If you can see that kind of positive growth year over year, and he's kind of adding those extra things, I think that'd be huge for him. One thing that's interesting to me is the bounce it seems he's gotten out of the All-Star game. And we just talked about how much it doesn't matter and how stupid it is. I really believe some of that psychologically for him, it really gave him a boost these first two games back. And I wonder, if that is a feature for him. I mean, certainly the best game of the year, I think, from him is that Golden State game after the passing of his best friend, and the focus and the energy and, to me, it unlocks things within him and what he's capable of. So I wonder if, some of this is a mentality and trying to do those things. He has the talent. Lord knows he has the talent. But I wonder if it's just a question of locking that in, adding a few more things this summer, and then coming back with a vengeance next year.
Yeah, for somebody who is so even-keeled, it is pretty clear that there are certain moments that build up and then come out on the court, which is good. Because that's somebody that you can trust long term. As that torch gets passed to him and he becomes the Celtics, all-star player who's generating the offense, locking down the defense, winning games for them night in and night out. He's the go-to player. You want him to be able to keep his emotions in check enough to not lose his head on the floor, and at the same time be able to use that as motivation and energy to lift him up and help him dominate games. And you bring up that Golden State game. That's a great example of that. And I think, probably that All-Star break gave him a little bit of that I've arrived kind of confidence being around all of those players. I think he wants to go as an actual All-Star next year. I'm not sure that will happen 100%. He plays a position that's kind of tough for him to land that spot, but I do think that that's, the next goal. He was there as the rookie. He's there as the sophomore. Now he's got to go as the pro, or he's not getting into the festivities, so to speak. So it'll be interesting to see. I also think some of the political stuff has been motivating him lately, John. Honestly, he's been vocal about certain comments that were made, telling players to just shut up and play basketball. And I think that kind of stuff motivates him to go out and play well too. And I think he handled that like a pro. He's very mature for a young player.
He's very mature, but he's still 21, so there's room to grow. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think he's, in fact, I think, as you said, he is very mature. I think the maturity in his game, I think, is the question of understanding the night to night drags of it and trying to be up for every one of those 82. I mean, stars don't do it. We knew that. We know that. But it's the question when you go from being, a good player who shows up occasionally, to being a really, really good player who's a reliable player for your team. You know, one of the biggest questions in the Rondo era is that, oh, well, when you play, you know, the nationally televised games, you know, you're going to get, you know, TV Rondo. And, you know, I think ultimately it worked against him, you know, and
Rondo.
you knew that was
I
what was
love
going to come his way.
Yeah.
You can't have that. You can't have that when you're Jaylen Brown and you're the third pick. And I think they're going to rely upon him. It could be relying upon him greatly here as they go into the playoffs.
All right. So what's your prediction on Tatum? Do you think he's fully going to come out of this little rookie wall slump that he hit? I mean, it seems like he's got plenty of hustle. Seemed like the form and just accuracy of his shot seems to have come back. Do you think he's going to snap out of it and we're going to see first third of the year Jayson instead of middle third of the year Jayson down the stretch here?
Let's cut him in half. We're going to cut him in half. No, I'm just kidding. I think we're going to get a little bit of both, honestly. I think that the wall is real. I think the pinky injury is real. But I think it's going to get better. I think there's going to be nights when he's just going to realize he's played 100 games of basketball in a given year and his body is just beat. But I think more importantly, I think he's going to be, I think he's going to be better prepared for it with this break. So I think we'll see somewhere in between. He's not going to be historically hot shooting, Jayson Tatum like we saw the first 2.5 months of the year, but he's not going to shoot as badly. He's not going to turn the ball over as much. I think we're going to get something in between, and you know, it may be more of a 12-point a game score, but I think the potential for 20-25 points from game to game. You know, I think that we're going to see probably more inconsistency from Jayson Tatum over the next, you know, month or two, or I guess 2 or 3 now as we're looking at the playoffs. And I think that's okay because once Gordon Hayward comes back, that'll fill the void.
Yeah, I just want to see nice slip in there. I like
there you go.
There. I want to see super aggressive Jayson Tatum. That's what I want to see. I want him to be attacking at the rim. I want to see that great crossover handle, whatever he does to set up. He's got a few different moves to set up his really strong finishes around the rim. I just think his length is so awesome. I want to see him assert himself more in that regard. And I definitely want to see him use that to set up that elbow jumper that's so reminiscent of Paul Pierce. I just like to see that happen more on a night in and a night out basis. It seemed like, especially leading into the All-Star break, that he was just kind of blending into the offense instead of being a threat on offense. And that has everything to do with taking an aggressive or assertive nature towards the game. And I think it's in there still, but I think it needs to be popped back out. Maybe somebody comes up and headbutts him a few times in the middle of a game or whatever it takes maybe he needs 5 cups of Java with Marcus Smart, whatever it's going to take to get that, you know, live wire side of him to come out on a regular basis. I'd actually be willing to take more of the mistakes as a consequence for that increased aggressiveness, because what I don't want to see is what we saw a lot of during that difficult stretch, and we can kind of maybe make this our final topic as we're approaching the end, but just Kyrie having to do everything in the fourth quarter. It isn't going to work. It can't work. It is part of what takes them out of everything that they do so well. It was what we saw from Isaiah Thomas. You and I have talked about this. It can't happen. There has to be other players on this team that they can go to, at least early in the fourth quarter, to share some of that responsibility. Otherwise, it just becomes too predictable.
Well, it seems unlikely, but there are 3 days left between now and the trade deadline. The Celtics do play Memphis one last time. I'm not sure it makes a difference, but sometimes teams don't like to deal with another team or cut somebody or whatever until after they've played them. There's a possibility that Memphis isn't going to do anything and let Tyreek go to Boston until, you know, they actually play the game. It seems unlikely, but I'm going to throw it out there, and maybe it means something, maybe it doesn't. I can look like a genius on next Sunday if that's the case. But I think you're right. I think that's their Achilles heel. It's going to be their Achilles heel. they're gonna have some struggles there in that second unit, and unless they're able to get Hayward back and have him play something of a scoring role in that second group, it's gonna be a challenge for them. Even if he's just a spot up shooter, that would do wonders for them. They've got to find, and to your other point though, they've got to find a way to move the ball. The ball is not moving well enough. Smart will help with that, with his return. Horford's rejuvenation, with some time off, that will help. But I feel like the ball doesn't move well enough with this team. And until they kind of figure that out, I think it's their offense is going to have some struggles, and even more is going to be pressed on the defense than really they need to be.
So Daniel Tice earned his way into the starting lineup, winds up draining some threes. We saw that creeping out of his game, I would say in January especially. And then first game back from the All-Star break against the bad boys, not really, but the Detroit Pistons. And he plays amazingly. That's a threat to Marcus Morris being able to be in the starting lineup. You'd love Marcus Morris to be that second unit scoring guy, but here's another thought. Do you think Jayson Tatum is 100% solid in that starting lineup, or do you think there's a chance that Morris can weave his way in there and they try Jayson with that second unit, or do you think that they're too concerned that will shake his confidence?
I think the latter is the case. I don't think that, I think that there's a way in which Tatum could fall out of the starting lineup. I think it's probably more reliant upon his inability to do the basic things. And I don't see that as likely, but it's possible. And, they're going to have to find a way to shake things up. I just don't know that putting Tatum into that second unit at this point, is going to be heading the right direction. Of course, we were talking about that and championing that in the early part of the year. It seemed like that was the natural development, but the way that Tatum's game has kind of backslid really since the start of January just leads me to believe that it just makes more sense to keep him where he is, try to find some other ways to try to find offense. And really, I'm looking at Hayward. Hayward's the guy I think that really is the one way they unlock that second group.
Yeah, we've talked about that. What do you think of Tyson, the starting lineup, even when Aaron Baines comes back? I mean, he's a pretty solid defender. He does like to move the ball around. I love Baines for his strength, and I think it fits maybe more on that starting unit than it does in the backup lineup, but especially if you're looking at Monroe and Baines, that's a lot of clogginess, I would say, for that second unit versus Tice and Monroe playing side by side with the second unit. But what do you think of Tice out there with the starters? Do you think it'll stick?
I think it could. Baines has not looked good for a while, I don't think. And consistently, the Baines we saw in the early part of the year has not made his reappearance. I mean, he's good at what he does, rebounder, rim defender. I mean, he does a fine job for this team, and he's valuable next to Al Horford, but he has struggled, I believe, since, really over that same period of time, starting in January. And I don't know if it's the schedule or what it is, but when everyone else has started to struggle, so has he. So I don't think it's a bad thing to give Tice a nod there. He's played well of late. Give him that shot. Maybe Baines just needs more time, and he'll come back rejuvenated as Smart did, and he'll be ready to go back to his regular self. But yeah, I've been really disappointed with Baines of late. I'm hoping Tice is an answer. I've heard a lot on the Chris Mannix pod on Yahoo. He's been talking about how, they're afraid of losing Baines, and that's a concern. If psychologically, the addition of Monroe and moving Tice in puts Baines into a spot where he's not able to be who he can be. But I think Baines has got to take some responsibility for his game, and his game has not been well. It's not been productive of late to the same way he had earlier in the year. So we'll see. We'll see if that ends up. But I'm all on board with it, and I think Monroe needs more time, man. That guy can score. He's got touch. He can rebound. I wish he had a little bit better sense of things on the defensive end, but maybe that will improve. Let's see. I'm not giving up hope on Greg Monroe.
No, it's early. I've given up hope on. I don't think defensively we're going to see a ton. I think offensively he can become more assertive and more confident in his role, and maybe that helps out that second unit. I also think Aaron Baines, there's probably some sort of an injury. I mean, I know there was an injury recently. It was kind of awkward how severe it wound up becoming, but I think there's been an injury issue, probably various minor ailments for several months now, just based on the way he started the year. And he's such a nice mid-range shooter, and even that wasn't really falling. We've only got about 2 minutes left here in the broadcast, but I do want to mention, as we were preparing to record the show, that longtime NBA agent, and I've actually never heard his last name said, so I'm assuming it's Dan Fagan, but he's a graduate of Yale Law School. He got into some sort of a wreck in Aspen, Colorado, bumping up against a bus or getting sideswiped or hit by a bus, something in his SUV, and unfortunately passed away. He was Antoine Walker's agent, as you and I talked about, John. He also represented DeMarcus Cousins, Monte Ellis, Chris Humphries, among others. But really an awkward year for him, having helped build ISC, the Independent Sports and Entertainment agency, and then they fired him. He files this weird countersuit, saying basically that they had an elaborate plan to set him up, defame him, and take his clients. And so, what an awkward year. What sad news for the NBA. It seems, and again, I don't know, not being an insider, but looking at the response on Twitter, it seems like he was a very well-liked agent right up until there was obviously this controversy over the last 12 months.
Yeah, Fagan is one of the, if not the most powerful agent, certainly in the top 2 or 3 in terms of most powerful agents in the NBA over the last 15, 20 years. And his fingerprints are all over a lot of the biggest deals that have happened, will happen. If there's anybody who owes him a debt of gratitude, it's Chandler Parsons, who has gotten him paid over and over and over again. But yeah, there's, Fagan was involved with DeAndre Jordan and some of that nonsense with Cuban, and I mean, there's a lot of tales there, I think, to be written about Dan Fagan's involvement in the NBA and all that, and certainly his passing is sad. But also, you can also see that there's a lot of reporters who were tweeting, their condolences. Obviously, they were quite close to Dan Fagan, and you could certainly read between the lines the value that he had in being in contact with the press. So rest in peace, certainly, and certainly sad to see, but yeah.
Yep.
Life goes on.
Life does go on, and just a tragic way for Dan to pass, kind of middle of the day. Very awkward scenario, very unfortunate. So everybody out there in the NBA family, anybody who did know Dan well, our condolences to you. That's going to do it for this week's show. The broadcast will be available on demand on the CLNS Media mobile app. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at CSL_Justin and at CSL_Duke. A heartfelt thank you to everybody for tuning in. And remember, you can help support the show by subscribing to Celtics Stuff Live on iTunes and Stitcher. We'd love it if you gave us a rating and a review, because your feedback is important to the show. For staff writer Samuel Elias, executive producer Larry H. Russell, the founder of CLNS Media, Nick Gelso, and my co-host John Duke, I'm Justin Poulin. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Celtics Stuff Live.
Celtics Stuff Live.